Okay, well, welcome everybody. My name is Brad Harris, and I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Eric Harter. And we felt that it was the time of year when some people might be waking up to the fact that college applications are due in a few short months. What do you do if you have a student, or if you as a student are watching this and you realize you really haven't done much in the way of college planning and application work? So today's webinar will cover college application as a crash program, how to get back on track after falling behind. So as I said, I'm Brad, and I'm joined by Eric. We're both college counselors here at ESM. And we both have picked up some tips along the way of our time here that we're eager to share with you today. So for those of you that are just kind of joining, please feel free to raise your hand or use the chat feature of the webinar. And either Eric and I will try to pay attention. And if we spot that, we'll try to address those questions as we go. But if we happen to miss those notifications, we'll certainly leave some time at the end so you can make sure your questions are answered then if we don't get to them along the way. Okay, so here's the scenario. Today is September 1st. Haven't started a thing for college essays or applications in general. Eric, what do we do? I'm a panicked parent. I've called you. What do I do?
Yeah, we get a few of these emergency cases every year. It is not uncommon, and while it's difficult and it's going to take a lot of work in a very short amount of time, there's no doubt that this process can be covered in a short amount of time. But the first step, I mean, is getting a plan in place. And it kind of seems hard when you're coming in late and knowing exactly what to do. And that's what this webinar will be about, of how to establish this plan and be able to execute this in a very, very short amount of time. So we kind of asked what you need to do. Like, what is it? Like, there's like, we broke it down to 7 major pieces of this puzzle that we will kind of go over piece by piece, and really focusing on the prioritization. When do you need to get these things done and done by? That is going to be a very important piece that helps you know, or your student know, what to work on in a term of prioritize and execute in a clear fashion.
That's right. So if we just take a step back, it's helpful to remind ourselves what are the big picture pieces of college applications. And really, there's 7 major components to a full college application. We address these components over the course of high school, but even at this stage as a senior, in September, it's still helpful to remember what all of this boils down to. So certainly the most important component is the courses that you've taken during high school and the grades you've gotten. There's really not much you can do about that at this point if you're a senior who's still trying to put this together at the at this stage. But obviously it's good to acknowledge that your grades and the courses you've taken along the way are the most important piece. So that's done in a sense, right? You don't need to worry so much about that, and that can be a little bit relieving to know. The second component that's very important is, of course, the essays. And that, I think, Eric, is going to be a large part of like how you manage what you need to do now if you're just getting started.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's what's going to take up the bulk of this process is actually the writing process, filling out applications, writing your activities lists, preparing for interviews, or showing your demonstrated interest in getting letters of rec. Probably all, or maybe 30%, while the essays are going to take 70% of this process. So while we will be focusing on all of these, knowing that the essays is where the bulk of this work is, that will be where you need to really prioritize when and what you need to write.
Yeah, for sure. Even if we don't cover every piece of this, these components today, obviously, please feel free to get in touch with ESM and follow up if we've left one of these pieces kind of uncovered a little bit. We're happy to talk a little bit more at length about those. But in terms of a crash program, I think step 1 is in that plan, confirm your school list. And we try to emphasize these 3 different parts of any school list to keep it nice and balanced. So those parts consist of your solid safety schools, the schools that based on your grades, in some cases your scores, you feel like you have a very good chance of getting accepted. Then you have your target kind of category, which are a set of schools that are competitive. You feel like you're qualified to go to those schools, but it's not, they're not shoo-ins. They're going to be a challenge, but you still have a good chance of getting into those schools. They're attractive to you based on your academic background and your extracurriculars and so forth. And then you have a set of reach schools that are long shots. You're probably not going to get in, just chances are you won't, but you might, and it would be great if you did, and you have a shot, so why not apply? And rallying a handful of those schools is a good idea. So this is kind of a balanced list. This is a
Yep.
pretty ideal snapshot. There's 9 schools here. That's not a huge list. Eric, how many
Yeah.
schools do typical students have on their lists?
Yeah, I mean, I think that especially for our California families, you're going to have the UCs and CSUs in most cases, and those UCs, yes, those students are going to need to be in the really strong GPA category for those top 5 or 6 UCs. And then when you're at this point in the game, focusing on those safeties and those target schools and figuring out which ones those are is going to be extremely important. The reach schools are always much easier to choose because, yeah, you're not going to turn down University of Michigan if you get in. You're not going to turn down some of those major schools that are extremely selective. So grabbing 3 or 4 of those that you do feel you're throwing your shot at makes a lot of sense, but focusing your time on those safety and target schools that the student, the family really, really likes, that also fits the financial aspect of the family, it is really important in this process. Also, the more selective the school in general, the more essays and more that's involved with those applications. So taking that in mind, where if kids have 8 or 9 of these reach schools and then a smaller safety and target, the amount of work that's involved is going to be higher. So kind of paying attention to the amount of supplements, especially if a school's on Common App, you can see they lay out what and work is involved. So it's paying attention to the totality of work, in my opinion. Having around, you're probably going to have the personal statement for most schools. You're going to have the UCSAs for the UCs. Now, if you're looking at some other schools, let's say you get 6 to 8 other schools, you're probably hitting maybe 5 to 8 other essays, which is reasonable at this time. If a student is trying to have 16 to 18 schools outside the UCs and CSUs, I think those essays are going to suffer dramatically because you're just not going to have enough time, especially to reach by the early deadlines for a lot of schools. Like a Loyola Marymount on this slide has early action, has early decision, which both those deadlines are November 1st. So it's one of those that paying attention to when the early rounds are due, which always is an advantage, especially on the early decision side. We did have a webinar on that yesterday that if anyone wants, send us a note. We'll send that one to you on the importance of early decision. But if a school has early action, University of Michigan, they're early action and regular decision only. So getting that early action can be a benefit to a lot of students, also getting this process done and ahead. So my advice, really focus on those safety and targets. The reaches are going to be a little bit easier to find.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. Part of what determines this list, if you're just starting, is how much work you have to do for each school. So on this particular list, I'd be happy if a student showed me this list because, Cal State, Arizona State, Loyola Marymount, even this year, which is surprising, they don't have extensive supplements or any supplements at all. So once you've written that personal statement, just like Eric said, for schools that are in the Common App, for example, you can just fire that common application off to multiple schools without doing additional work. And I think that's going to really take the pressure off, at least having some of those schools kind of done and then being able to move on and chip away at the schools that do have supplements, and being mindful of that, given the constrained timeline when you're putting your school list together, is a great idea. Eric, you also mentioned the applications, the UCs, the Common App.
Yeah.
Obviously you want to get a handle on where your schools, you can apply to your schools. So if we're just looking at like the first bucket, the safety schools of this example students list, Cal State is in this Cal State application, of course. UC Merced is one of the UC schools. That's in the UC application. Arizona State is going to go through the Common application. Make sure that you've covered your bases. So look at the rest of your list and just check off all those other schools to ensure you're not having to go through the Coalition app, for example, or some other kind of specific app. If you're looking at a very ambitious school that's in the arts, like Juilliard, for example, or the New England Conservatory of Music or MIT, they might have their own specific applications. So you just want to ensure that your list, is covered by all the applications you're actually starting.
Yeah, because I mean, if you're trying to manage 6 or 7 different applications in a short period of time, I would be very, very worried about that. When you can cover 3 separate applications, which this is the most common setup, Common App, UC App, Cal State, overall managing these 3 isn't too bad. But if you start to add in Coalition and Apply Texas and independent apps that have multiple essays, you're starting to have a lot of chances where things could either go wrong, or you're running up against deadlines and you're trying to rush through it. So being focused on these 3 type of application platforms can be very, very beneficial.
Yeah, it's very efficient. Okay. Now, there are some in the weeds steps that we should probably cover, especially,
Absolutely.
this major aspect of the common application that's very much out of students' control. Much of the last minute planning and work that we're going to talk about, you can do, but this step you can't do. And you're really relying on your counselor at school, along with your teachers who, might provide your letters of recommendation. So what is this FERPA thing all about, Eric?
Yeah, I mean, and before I get to the FERPA, why we put this so early in the webinar is this is one of those pieces that a lot of other students have already asked the teachers for letters of rec. So now you might be coming in behind other students. So it's figuring out which teachers can. This is a if you hear this webinar now, you're going today to your teachers to go talk to them as early as possible. But it also makes sense to figure out which schools have them. Not every school requires 2 letters of rec. I mean, the school we're looking at here, Elon, tremendous university, doesn't require any. Actually has only room for 1 optional teacher recommendation. So that can help your cause a bit too. But I still recommend every student go talk to your 2 teachers and secure that letter of rec, invite them to your Common App, and you'd be way ahead. But there's these little details like FERPA, which throw off a lot of students because they're not really sure what that means and kind of how to get through it. We wanted to add this little step because in reality, you must waive your rights under this, which it's counterintuitive for a lot of us to waive. But really what this does helps protect the teachers that they don't necessarily have to show you the letters of rec. Most teachers will, but there's a lot of legality forms here that kind of have protections for both sides of this. Protects schools, protects you, protects the counselors, protects the teachers. So you do need to waive your rights. And there's these small little details like that oftentimes can trip up some momentum, because you can't add all of the colleges, you can't add teachers, you can't add advisors to this without having some of these things done. So that's what the FERPA is. We recommend everyone waive their right for it. That allows all letters to be non-biased, and colleges want to see that. But step 1, or step 3, get in front of your teachers, ask for those letters of rec. It's vital. A lot of students have already asked. Get in that line real quick.
Yeah, that's a great point. So you're just starting to organize your list. You're just starting to open your applications. Well, on the common application, you do have to deal with these letters of recommendation. So Eric is exactly right. In the real world, back at school, think about a couple of teachers you want to write, you would ask to write your letters of recommendation. Perhaps they're teachers from your junior year that you're going to go back and talk with, who know you better than your new senior year teachers. That's fine. But that's a great point, Eric. And then once you get back into the Common App, you will see this clearly once you become familiar with how it's laid out. Underneath each college is this Recommenders and FERPA tab. And it is one of the first steps that we recommend you do, because you want to get that process going, since, after they agree to provide a recommendation to you, that's kind of out of your hands. So you just get this part done, and then you can move on with step 4. If you have any trouble with where this is located and how to do this, we're here for you. Don't hesitate to follow up after the webinar with us. Okay, so step 4. Eric recommends that you prioritize your applications, by your schools and the deadlines. You got to figure out where to start. Which one do you do first? Which one do you leave to the end? So in many cases, you will organize your school list by which school you want to go to the most. In some cases, you will organize your list according to which applications are due the earliest. You have to sort of balance all of those considerations and then kind of try to come up with a step-by-step list of, I'm going to do this school, then this school, then this school. And we've kind of exemplified how this student might come to that decision. So perhaps they decide to use that very powerful early decision kind of, strategy, and they decide to do that at Case Western Reserve. Well, in that case, that's the first priority. They want to get those essays done. They want to make sure the Case Western Reserve application is solid and polished and ready to go. And then maybe they're going to do that one other early action school that's permitted under like the fine print, in this case, University of Michigan. Sometimes, there's certain restrictions on where you can apply early action. I don't know, Eric, if you want to say anything more about that.
Yeah, I mean, understanding the early decision, early action, restrictive early action, rolling. Quickly, early decision, it's that you're bound to go to that school. You're telling that one school that you're my number one. Early action allows you to apply early, but it's non-binding. Then you have the rolling admissions like Arizona State, which means they have this big pie. And as students are accepted, the pie gets smaller and smaller and smaller as it rolls through the application process. So anytime you see rolling, that's one of those that maybe if you do have your application done for Case Western, you could also then submit Arizona State because it would have most things covered already other than the questions for Arizona State. Then you have law school. Let's say you get rejected from Case Western, you now have the ability to early decision to another school that is now a school that you're saying, if I get in, I will go to that school. And it allows kind of having the variety. I always recommend students that if a school has early action, it is always my preference to at least use that. Obviously, early decision will always be our strongest play, but I like having my applications done early. I like that if a student does get deferred, they will have now a chance a lot of times to write a continued interest letter, which will give them multiple touches with that university. When you apply regular decision, you only have that one touch point. Now, there are a lot of schools that's all they have. University of San Diego only has regular decision. You don't have those multiple touch points. That's not how it's set up. But early action, if it's there, I still highly recommend it. But in this case, when you're coming in late and you're having to do a lot of work, you might not have the ability to get all those supplements done in time. You want to have your supplements done right, not your supplements done rushed. So that's a big piece of prioritizing those applications and schools by their deadlines.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Bottom line here, decide which schools are most important to you. And if they have early decision, we recommend you think very carefully about using that. In many cases, it's advised because of the admissions advantage. But ultimately, look at the deadlines that the schools impose, decide where you might go early, and then judge which school you tackle first based on the essay workload in many cases. Okay. The next thing to pay attention to are standardized tests. Now, I actually think that kids are in a very good spot who are arriving at this late this year because like every single school is still either test blind or test optional. However, there are still some opportunities to test before it's too late this fall, before your applications are going to be turned in and those test scores aren't going to reach the schools in time. So it is helpful still, even early September, to look at when are the official test dates. So for the SAT, those are October 2nd, November 6th, and December 4th. You can look those up for the ACT as well. And depending on what your timeline is, so early decision versus regular decision versus rolling, and whether or not the schools you're applying to will accept scores, you might register for some of those tests, try to get a score in, because in many cases, we think that it could help you. What are you saying to your students these days about should they or shouldn't they submit scores, Eric?
If a student can get in the historical range of that school and their test scores, undoubtedly it is a great thing to have. And I would like also to distinguish between test optional and test blind. Test optional means if you don't submit a test, it's not supposed to be held against you. test blind means the school will actually not accept any tests, so that they're not going to give you the option. They are just going to be blind. So test optional, if a student is not hitting the score of the historical range, then it is likely best to go test optional and focus on the strengths of that application, maybe not the test score. If your test score is very strong, no doubt it can definitely help, especially in the early rounds last year. It seemed to have definitely a little bit of an advantage to have that test score. But overall, especially schools like a Loyola or Case Western that are very, very holistic, they're going to be looking at your application as totality. But if you can get in the test score range, take those tests.
Yeah, great point. Okay, step 6, essays.
Yeah.
This is the heavy lifting probably that you're going to be doing between now and the holidays when all this process is winding down. So the biggest essay that you'll have to do almost certainly will be the personal statement on the Common Application. It's the 650 words, so it's certainly the longest essay. In almost every case, there are very few examples of schools that will permit you to write up to like 800 words, but that's rare. Normally, this is the biggest essay. Target a time to finish this. If you can finish your personal statement on the Common Application by the end of this month, September 30th, that's great. That puts you in really good shape. Then, depending on your school list and how you've prioritized the schools, you can chip away at those college supplements that are shorter essays, usually 100 to 300 words, on prompts that each individual college that you're applying to within the Common Application wants to ask, in addition to the Common App personal statement that goes to everybody. Some schools have 1 or 2, some schools have, up to 4. There's various combinations of these specific questions that schools are going to ask you in addition to that personal statement. Pay attention to how many and what the word counts are and get those done in order of priority. The UC application is very simple. You just have to write 4 350-word essays chosen from a set of 8 different prompts. If you can get those done by October 30th, then you're in great shape for the UCs, because the UC essays are due at the end of November. So you should feel really good if you've gotten those done by the end of October.
Absolutely.
Okay. Step 7. This is where things start to get exciting, I think, Eric. At least as a counselor, this is where I get excited when I see my students are moving through step 7.
Yep. When you get to step 7, that means that you're now starting to hit submit buttons. It's also starting to look at interviews. Interviews are changing every year. So some schools want you to request interview as early as September, October. Other schools want it after you apply. So confirming, requesting, looking at the policies of each school. Is it an admissions interview? That's different than if it's an alumni interview. So it's one of those that and a lot. We saw a lot more of these in the last cycle, especially within admissions of offering interviews. And if your student or you, the student, is a relatively good speaker and can kind of think on your feet and have some prep within this, like, you should interview. Put that face to your name on that application, and they're generally always going to help you. So looking at that smaller piece, but it can be very, very important. But really, probably right around the point that you're ready to submit is about the time to look at these. I do think that your essays and the applications are going to take a little more priority over trying to get the exact interview policies. But this is something that, generally speaking, with a little bit shorter list, you should be able to figure out in a couple hours kind of what each school is asking you to do. And overall, they're different, and not every school offers them. So it can be where there's half of your list is not doing interviews.
Yeah, that's a good point. So that's the interview terrain is going to be somewhat specific to your list. And it probably will take just paying attention, doing a little research. And in the worst case scenario, you can, always reach out to the admissions office and ask about this if you're unsure.
Yeah,
or you can ask us. You can reach out and we can help you figure that out. All right, step 8, somewhere around Thanksgiving, hopefully. So you're not, eating turkey while you're finishing your applications, but you're done. Pat yourself on the back, attend to your health, meditate, read a book, take some time. But this is a pretty arduous process condensed into only a few months. So you should be proud of yourself for submitting a handful of applications and getting through this so quickly. It's hard. So just relax. Remember, in most cases for seniors, this very well could be your last year just living at home as you always have with your family, during the holidays. I always try to remind families, don't just take that for granted. Like, savor these holidays, savor this time. It's not all stress. This is just another step on the long road of life that you've hopefully just completed. And, it's time to really enjoy that and just, enjoy being done. So I don't know, Eric, are you a big
Yeah.
meditation kind of guy? Do you have mantras that you engage?
No. I mean, I focus with my students really in August and September and October, because you do want to have, our goal is always to have Thanksgiving break off, have Christmas break off, because then you're able to really enjoy those last moments at home with family, but also a lot of your high school friends. Like, it's one of those times that everyone goes in different directions at the end of the school year off to college. So there's a lot of special moments that working really hard this month, yes, it's difficult. Yes, it's going to be a lot of hours. It's not going to be a lot of other free time to do other things, but it'll be more than worth it at the end of it to be able to have Thanksgiving break, to be able to have winter break, all that time back. You'll be very happy that you worked very hard in September.
Yeah, that's well put. Okay. What comes next can be
Yeah.
a little bit challenging
Yeah.
because it's waiting and staying vigilant. Pay attention to your emails. One little tip I don't think we included here. In most cases, I can't think of a case actually outside that we wouldn't recommend. You should always be using your school email for all of these applications. When you create these applications and
Yeah.
register and so forth, your school email. So get into the habit of checking your school email if you're not already, to make sure you are seeing any communication from these schools, potential interviewers that are requesting, a meeting with you or what have you, and follow up promptly on any incoming communication that you happen to get. When are people typically hearing back, Eric? I know that I get that question a lot.
Yeah. I mean, so one of the first things after you submit, I don't know what the exact number is, but it's a very high percentage of schools are actually going to email you what we call a portal. Sometimes they call it an application status page. Sometimes it's just a status page. You don't all have different names for them. But when you get that email from that school that says, please create your account, create your portal, you want to do that pretty quickly. Admissions officers can actually see how long did that take you to do. That does not mean that you need to do it within 3 minutes of receiving it. But if you let it sit for 2 months, they might go, well, you're not really that interested in them. But if you open your portal and you're making sure that they're getting any extra information, if you have a portfolio, so let's say you're in screenwriting or in film, there could be extra pieces, especially with the UCs and certain majors, they could be asking for extra supplements after you submit. So that's where paying attention and being really good with inbox management, and something that after my seniors do submit, we work on this. We actually work on what's it like to archive and keep your inbox relatively clean so that you don't miss these key emails. Because there's nothing worse than when a student says, yeah, I missed a chance at an interview because I didn't see the email. So it is really, really important. Yes, email is a lifelong skill. It's likely not to go anywhere. So it's one of those that getting good at this, there's just never been a time that you need to pay attention to it more. This is how colleges communicate with you. They email you. Yes, more colleges are trying to text a little bit more, but still, so much of what you're going to learn and need from college is going to happen through email. So pay attention. It's going to go to the email that you've used on Common App. Yes, we recommend your school email. Some schools, the email doesn't receive, so then you have to use a personal. That's okay. But it's one of those that you have to be really, really diligent about this, because those portals and information could be asked of you that you want to be able to respond to. So absolutely. Once you hit
Absolutely.
submit, it's not done when you hit submit.
Not done. And then for decisions,
Yeah.
early rounds, early decision, early action, restrictive early action. When are students typically hearing
Yeah,
back?
you're generally hearing from a lot of schools before Christmas, so around that December 15th range. There'll be some schools that you apply early action and you're not hearing back till January, February. A lot of times, if you're unsure or it's not posted somewhere online, you can send the admissions a quick email saying, when do you expect to have those decisions out? But early decision, early action in general, it's before Christmas. There are definitely some schools that are after that, and you also can have some regular decision schools. Let's say like University of Washington, that was November 15th, but you're not going to hear back from them until March. And or the UCs and the CSUs, it's end of November, but you're not hearing back until March a lot of times. So it is hard. It is one of the more difficult pieces of having to wait for a lot of these decisions. But hopefully, in a lot of cases, you've applied early decision, you get a tremendous email a little before Christmas, and now you know where you're going to college, and you're going to be able to be super happy going into that. But a lot of kids, you're also going to be early action, but you also will have a lot of early regular decision acceptances to lean on as well. So
And
that's the
then
general cadence.
those regular decisions will usually start coming back March.
I mean, early to late March. I mean, there was some that were early April this year. So I feel like the range of the returns is wider than it's been. And it really also depends on the selectivity of the school. I think the more selective the school, the longer that they're taking to get some of those decisions back.
Okay. Well, in that case, hopefully you feel like this is just giving you enough of a briefing so that you have a sense of direction now. And that moment of panic is subsiding and transforming itself into motivation to get this stuff done. Our website, esmprep.com, is your one-stop shop to get in touch with us, learn more. We have all kinds of webinars there on other topics that might be useful to you. We really appreciate everybody stopping by. I'm going to just exit out of this full screen just for a moment so that I can see if anybody has any questions. And so far, I'm not sure I see any. Eric, have you seen any that I might have missed?
No, I think we're good. But if they do, then they can always contact us through the website, and we will get back to them at any point.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. And Eric, this has been a real pleasure.
Thanks, Brad. Appreciate it.